December 17, 2017. Under the NFL's definition of a catch, the league was right to take away what looked to be a game-winning Jesse James touchdown catch at the end of Sunday night's Patriots-Steelers game. There are still unanswered questions, notably, if the call was as easy as the explanations of Alberto Riveron and Tony Corrente have suggested, why it took what felt like 10 minutes to overturn the call, but everyone on the league side of things seems to agree that the review was processed properly and led to the correct call. There have been way too many controversial reversals of touchdowns this season. What happened on Sunday with Jesse James wasn't one of them. A dramatic ending to the Steelers-Patriots matchup turned controversial after officials overruled what appeared to be a go-ahead touchdown catch by the Steelers tight end Jesse James, a decision derided by James and several of his teammates. Here's the problem, though. Just about everyone who has watched a football game before also thinks James caught that football. Watch the replay. The Patriots defenders who surround James after the play aren't arguing it's incomplete. Bill Belichick, who would have been pictured frantically gesturing on camera in the case he thought it was a drop, isn't depicted. Jim Nantz says there's no doubt it's going to hold up, as he and Tony Romo spend 2 minutes watching replays before it even occurs to them that the ball spun slightly as James hit the ground. The rule was interpreted correctly, but the rule is bad. There are plenty of problems with the NFL right now, but many of them are either intractable or downright unfixable. The catch rule is not one of them. The NFL has to fix it, and that might require a totally radical sort of solution. Let's make arguments for 3 very different types of changes to the much-hated catch rule. Option 1, the evolution. While the NFL's catch rules certainly aren't perfect, they've evolved the way they have for a reason. Tangible in-game examples, like the Burt Emanuel rule, have driven practical changes to the laws over time. They're never going to fix the problem and make everyone happy all the time, and no rule on paper is ever going to address every possible in-game catch situation. As a result, the league needs to be proactive about monitoring how the rule is impacting games and be comfortable making changes every year or 2 accordingly. With that in mind, the league's catch rule isn't really all that bad over the first 99.9 yards of the field. Most of the complaints we've seen over the past few years, starting most memorably with the Dez Bryant catch, revolve around touchdowns and would-be touchdowns. Those plays are always going to stand out in the mind because of their importance, but they're also where the current rules seem to fall apart. The Calvin Johnson rule, so called for taking a touchdown away from one of the league's star wide receivers in Week 1 of the 2010 season, simply doesn't work. It leaves too much up for interpretation and offers little clarity into what receivers actually need to do to ensure a touchdown. James's catch fell short because he failed to, as Corrente described, survive the ground. The ball moved slightly as James hit the ground, but independent of their rulebook, it's clear that James caught the ball, only for it to budge slightly as he leaned forward to try to push ahead of the plane. Tight end Jesse James finished with 2 catches for 7 yards, and his go-ahead touchdown in the final minute was called off. AP photo /on right. To improve matters, let's get rid of the surviving the ground rule and stop taking away touchdown catches for balls that narrowly drop slightly after a player's established contact. Runners can score touchdowns just by flashing the ball over the plane of the goal line, but receivers currently need to complete their catch to the ground to become runners and qualify for touchdowns. Under our rule change, a player becomes a runner as soon as he catches the ball and gets 2 feet, or 1 knee or elbow or cheek, as Damiere Byrd exhibited Sunday, inbounds. This rule isn't perfect, but it's an improvement. We don't have to go back to the football move conundrum with this change. The receiver doesn't have to turn upfield or hold onto the football until his teammates have started their synchronized celebration. If the receiver bobbles the ball on the way to the ground and never actually makes a firm catch, that's an incomplete pass. Otherwise, if he catches the ball on his feet or back, and establishes himself in bounds. It's a catch. To go along with it, let's fix the actual worst rule in football. When a fumble through the pylon becomes a turnover and a touchback for the other team. Nobody likes this rule outside of the one game every 3 or 4 seasons in which it benefits their team. The problem is that the solution of simply giving the ball back to the offense on the 1-yard line basically gives offensive players a free opportunity to reach for the pylon with no repercussions, given that a swatted ball near the pylon is almost always going to go out of bounds. Fortunately, Twitter fixed that for us. I asked about possible solutions to this problem back in October, and certified genius at ChiefDog10 solved our crisis with what he called the self-touchback. I like reverse touchback, but the idea is his. When the ball is fumbled out of bounds through the pylon, don't turn the ball over. Just push it back to the 20-yard line. I'll add that the down should count, so the reverse touchback basically costs you 19+ yards of field position but otherwise lets you keep the football. You're punished for fumbling, but it's not the 8-point swing, including the missing touchdown and the possession given to the other team, that comes with the current rule. These changes don't solve the catch rule problem, but they eliminate the most frustrating and confusing plays we complain about on Sundays. James's catch would have been ruled a completion and then a momentary fumble as he hit the ground and stretched forward, which he would have then recovered. The Steelers wouldn't have been awarded a touchdown, but they would have been able to get back on the ball at the 1-inch line. Option 2. The de-evolution. The league's catch rule is too complicated, and all the changes we've made have turned it into something like an overfit model. We're asking a lot of refs on a weekly basis as they deal with an increasingly speedy game. The current replay system makes it so that referees often rule a big play a turnover or a touchdown on the field, which creates an automatic review, but one inherently likely to lead to those decisions being upheld, given that ties go to the call on the field. The widespread unpopularity and confusion surrounding the catch rule means we have to start over. So, let's go with what Larry Fitzgerald suggested should be the new rule 2 years ago. If a receiver catches the ball and gets 2 feet, a knee, an elbow or a cheek on the ground, it's a catch. If he stays upright and the ball is stripped out of his hands or he bobbles it, the ball becomes a live fumble. Doesn't that feel refreshingly simple and comprehensible? We still need to come up with a clear definition of catch, but let's try to keep that to the shortest possible definition. Maybe it becomes a catch at the moment when the receiver grabs the ball in his hands without bobbling it. Perhaps you put a time frame on it, like the receiver cradles the ball for a half second or a full second. This will unquestionably increase fumbles, which will be fodder for the tiresome and flimsy arguments about how football has always been great and is now suddenly worse. That's fine. The league's turnover rate has been dropping steadily for decades. Fumbles are fun plays. Everyone loves to point. Players will also adapt and begin to protect the football earlier through the catch process. It will also mean more catches. But how often do you hear people complaining that something was ruled a catch when it shouldn't have been? We're living in a golden age of receivers. Let's reward Antonio Brown and Julio Jones for being amazing. Ben Roethlisberger had 281 passing yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception. Photo by